All right, lesson 4, Liquefy and AI. In this chapter, we are going to make this boxer dude. It starts off with a regular eye, and we're going to give him a black eye, and we're also going to look at some early AI generation. So to get started with this chapter, we're going to look at how we update Adobe products, because a lot of the tools that we'll use in this chapter update pretty frequently. Adobe actually does pretty major updates at least once a year, if not twice a year, so it's worthwhile keeping your stuff up to date. Also, if you're into photography and you're buying the newest and best cameras, you have to update in order to be able to use Adobe Camera Raw, which we'll use in a later chapter. After looking at how to update stuff, we'll look at how to use different remove tools in Photoshop, so like remove tool, healing brush tool, and so on. Then we'll also take a quick little dip into the brush tool, which we'll look at in more depth next chapter in the painting chapter. And then finally, we're going to open up Adobe Firefly and look how we can make our own AI generations in Firefly, and then also talk about some of the limitations of Firefly versus some of the AI models out there. All right, first things first, we're going to launch our Adobe Creative Cloud app. So if it's already running in the background on your own Apple, you can come up here to the top and click on the little cloud icon to open it up. Otherwise, you'll need to go down to Applications and open it up from your Applications folder. Once you're in here, you can come over to where it says Updates, and we can see that I've got one queued up that needs to run through. So I'll click on here. We can see that it's the beta version of Photoshop that I've got because I like to play with the newest stuff. And I would just click first. Actually, we want to check for it to see if there's any other updates floating around out there. And we can see actually Media Encoder also needs to be updated. And I'll just click Update All to start these updates running in the background. Now, again, you want to keep your stuff up to date because there'll be lots of bug fixes in here. There'll be new tool launches. And then again, if you're a photographer, Camera Raw will update whenever there's a new set of cameras that comes out. And in order to access the raw files in those new cameras, you have to update Photoshop and the related programs. All right, to get started, let's open up our base image, which is going to be our boxer. So navigate to wherever you have access on your files, go ahead and open it up, and let's take a look at this boxing guy. So this is an AI generated image, and when we look at the AI generation, it's an older one, so it's a little obvious, but like some of the things that we can look at to kind of identify this is misplacement of details. So like here on his forehead, we have temple lines, like really this should probably be all shifted over a little bit. When we look at his nose, we can see we have this kind of superfluous curl. When we look at this boxing glove, we can see that a thumb is coming out of it. We've got like a thumb mark right here on this boxing glove. These two boxing gloves don't match. There's some issues right here with his mouth. If we zoom in on his eyes, it's really apparent in the eyes. Like eyes are a pretty easy way to tell, especially in photographs, if something's messed up. Another tell will be like lines and folds and stuff that don't make any sense in the clothing, particularly things like zippers and seam lines. And then the ear in this one's a little rough as well. So again, this one's a little bit older, 2023, so that's one of the reasons why it's not so hot, but it will be a good example for us to go through and clean some of these up. Newer AI generation models, particularly stuff that's coming out of ChatGPT, are really good. And it's becoming harder. It's becoming less frequent where you'll have major issues like these, and it's becoming harder to even find smaller issues in the AI generated images. So like this is just going to be part of our life going forward, is that a lot of images we see on the internet will likely have been generated by AI. All right, so let's take a look how we can clean up some of the flaws in this image and learn some of our content removal tools in Photoshop. So we are going to remove the line on his nose. We are going to remove this line on his forehead. We're going to partially hide this weird little fold thing. And then we are going to remove this thumb right here. And then we're going to use AI to generate a new background. Let's start by resetting our workspace. I'm going to come up to the top right. I'll click on the workspace button and I will reset essentials, and I will make sure that I am in essentials. I'm going to go ahead and reset my foreground and background colors by coming over here to the far left. I've got the tiny little black and white box, and I'll go ahead and click on that to reset my colors as well, just to again reset my workspace. So Photoshop has a series of removal tools, and we can find them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tools down. It looks like a little band-aid. And if we click and hold on it, we can see that there's a series of them. So the spot healing brush tool, how it works is I'll paint over something. Again, I've got a huge mouse because I've got my mouse zoomed in, so it's easier for you guys to see. But I can paint over something and it will try to remove it. And what it's doing is it's looking at the areas surrounding, in this case, like that black mark I just painted on there. And it's putting stuff from the surrounding area into it, and it's trying to figure out what I want to remove. So like if I paint over a line, it will try to pull out that line. If I do something drastic like paint over this eyeball, it will try to paint over the eyeball. And, for the eye, it doesn't do a very good job. If I click and hold and I move to the next one, the remove tool, this one I can paint over a series of things that I want to remove. And what it will do is it will use AI to try to remove it. We'll go ahead and cancel this one because it takes a while. My advice when using this tool is up here at the top where it says remove after each stroke. I would turn this off and I would go through and remove a bunch of stuff all at once. And then I would click check mark and have it run through those using AI to try to remove it. It runs a little bit faster that way. And it's using mostly generative AI to find and remove those kind of things. This is also where I find distractions. In this case, we don't have anything like this in here that we want to remove. So it's not really applicable to us, but it's in this tool and it's cool. Moving further down, we have the healing brush tool. And this is one where students kind of struggle a lot with. And it's a nice tool. And what it is like if I need more control about what I'm copying from, so let's say I wanted to not end up with any of this mustache in this line right here, I could hold down the Alt Option key and I could say, please sample from his cheek. And if I make this bigger, you can see that it's got some of the cheek loaded up in the brush. And I get a little crosshair right there showing me where I'm copying from, making it easier to say where to copy from rather than just the surrounding area. I'm saying the surrounding area, but please put this area in there, blending it in for me. This is basically an advanced version of what used to be our main go-to removal tool, which was the stamp tool, which is a literal copy-paste tool. Then we have the patch tool. Again, pretty straightforward. I draw a selection just like I would with the lasso tool. And I click and drag somewhere else, and I copy that into that space. It works okay. Then we have the kind of the opposite version of that, which is the content aware move tool. Again, I draw a selection and I'll click and drag and it will try to fill in the previous area and then move the eye to a new area. And this one, like for most instances, just doesn't work that well. Like if I'm moving stuff around in somewhere easy, like a sky, like I'm moving a bird or something, it can work okay. I've just never had that much luck with it. Then we have finally the red eye tool, which I don't teach anymore because it just doesn't come up that often anymore. Basically, red eye is where you're getting incident light from a flash off of somebody's, not iris, off of somebody's retina. So it usually appears red in people and yellow in animals. And you use this to correct that red eye in the pupil. It's really easy to use. So if you ever do have to use it, it's pretty simple to figure out. For the first one we're going to start with the spot healing brush tool. And with the spot healing brush tool active, I'll click either up here in the top, or I'll right click in my canvas, not my workspace, my canvas, and I can set my brush size and hardness. In this case, let's do 10 for my size, and let's do 30% hardness. We'll zoom in a little bit. Good artists, good photoshoppers, good graphic designers will always zoom in when needed. You could zoom in too much and do too much detail stuff, but like for something you see out here, you'll want to zoom in to fix it. So if the spot healing brush tool active, I'll just paint over this line. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger in certain areas, trying to really get all of that shadowed area from that kind of mist generation right there. That looks okay. Now what I don't want to do is I don't want to paint in this area again, but I could paint over this seam. With any of these tools, if they don't work the first time, don't keep using it in the same spot because you can start seeing it looks a little weird and goofy in there. If it doesn't work the first time, undo it and try it again. And then if that still doesn't work, switch to a different removal tool. Don't keep applying removals over the same spot. It causes problems. All right, I'm going to hold spacebar to get the hand tool active. And I am going to come up to the eyebrow right here. We're going to fix this little brow line on his cupped forehead. To do that, we're going to click and hold and pick the healing brush tool. I could also shift through these using the hotkey. So in this case, it would be Shift J. And we can see it floats through all those different tools. So you could just use Shift J rather than click and hold to get the correct tool loaded up. Now, besides setting a source, which is Alt Option, the other thing that people have a lot of trouble with this one is the idea of aligned versus unaligned. So if I set a source with a line turned on, so let's make it something easy to see. So I'm going to pick his eyeball and I copy over here and I paint, and I release my mouse. Notice how the little marker showing me where I'm copying from is saying the same distance away each time I do that. Versus if I turn aligned off and we'll set that source to the eyeball again, and we're like eyeball, eyeball, eyeball. And so every time I release my mouse, it goes back to that initial source setting. So we want to copy from this relatively small spot to remove this relatively long line. So we're going to turn aligned off, and we're going to start by sampling from right about here. I'm holding down Alt-Option, by the way, to turn on sampling, and I'll just left-click once. I'm not holding down the mouse key. I'm releasing Alt-Option. It switches back to my mouse cursor, and I've got a little crosshair right here, which is caps locks, by the way, instead of the circle. So my circle appears very large from that zoomed-in mouse. Let's change the size of what we're using a little bit. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to do 22, and we'll do 30% again. So I'm going to start painting over this line. While I'm painting, I'm going to see a little crosshair appear right here showing where I'm copying from. And as I get close to the eyebrow, I'm going to release my mouse. So paint, 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 paint. Getting close to the eyebrow, release my mouse. The source will snap back to the spot. So I'm going to start painting again. And we can see that this keeps me from grabbing in that eyebrow as I clean up this little forehead area. Ooh, don't like that. Well, I cleaned up this little forehead area on my figure. Looks fine. All right, for this line right here, we're going to sample from over yonder. So holding Alt-Option. And I'm going to paint over this kind of dark area. I'm drawing little circles while I'm painting because I find that's easier to kind of get the shape I want. I release my mouse. Release my mouse. Maybe copy a little bit more. So you see I've got like a little bit of doubling right here. So this is where I might come and remove a little bit of doubling. And is this perfect? No. Will this work for today? Yeah, this will be good for us right now. All right, let's nuke this part of the glove. So I'm going to zoom in on it. And let's grab the patch tool. And I'm going to draw a selection over it. And when I'm drawing my selection, notice that I'm staying out away a little bit from where the kind of curve that shadow forms, because that'll kind of mess this up a little bit. And when I'm dragging this over, I'm going to, as much as possible, try to find lines that I can line up together. And that will help kind of blend this together. That said, this blend won't be perfect. But for a quick and dirty removal, this would work. If I was doing this professionally, I'd probably come through and then clean this up with the healing brush tool, setting some pretty careful samples. But for this, we just need a kind of quick and dirty demo of that tool. Finally, we have this thumb. And none of the tools we have, none of the tools that we've looked at will really work very well for the thumb right now. So like if I try to grab it with this patch tool, and I'm like, please can't be from over here. Oops, I don't have the patch tool. There we go. And I'm like, please copy from over here. We can see that it brings in a bunch of that glove. If I try the spot healing brush tool, it's also going to struggle us to remove this. Like none of these tools are going to give us a good removal for this thumb. And it'll be pretty obvious why here in a second. First, let's go ahead and select that thumb. So I'll hit L for lasso, or I'll click the lasso up here in the top left. And I'm going to super lazy go through this kind of gray area around the thumb. And then when I get here, I'm going to be a little bit more careful because what I'm really doing right now is I'm drawing what is going to become the edge of my glove. So kind of think of the line we're drawing right here as a continuation of the glove. All right, so I've got that selected. And let's take full control of how it's sampling the surrounding area to remove this. To do that, I'm going to come up to Edit, and I'm going to go to Content Aware Fill. Now this is different from going to fills. Like if you go to Fill, and you see there's a content aware fill right here. This is not what we want to use. It's similar, but it doesn't give us as much control. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to pick Content Aware Fill. In Content Aware Fill, we have two windows. The first window, this left one, has some areas in green. I'm going to hit Command-0 to fit it on my screen, and I'll leave the preview one zoomed in. And anywhere that's marked green right now, it's using that to copy and remove the area that I had selected. And we can see that I've got like some nose and glove and other stuff bleeding into this, and it doesn't look very good. I can modify what it's bringing in by using this brush that's currently active. I'm going to go ahead and set my brush size to 50, just because it's a nice, decent size. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint over anything that I don't want here. So anything that's not white background, I'm going to paint over. So like this chunk of his nose that it's grabbing, no thank you. Please, not this, also not this, definitely none of that, or like this blurry part of his shoulder that can go away. And, you know, the stuff with the glove, let's also remove that. Missed a little bit right there. How does that look? That looks good. There we go. And so this again allows us to kind of use Photoshop to quickly remove these things, still somewhat automatically, but telling it where to copy from that automatic removal. Over here on the right, make sure it says output to current layer, not, you know, duplicate or a new layer. That can be useful if you don't want to do destructive editing, but for us today, we'll leave it as current layer, and we'll click OK. And then we'll click deselect, and we have a nice removal of that thumb. So quick, easy, content-aware, and content-aware removal tools. So those were all content-aware removal tools, by the way. So except for the remove tool. So content-aware will only use stuff that is present in this image to do my removals. If I have a selection active and I use this generative fill, or I am using the remove tool, I can end up with generative AI adding new and novel stuff to my image. So that's kind of the difference there. Content-aware will only use stuff in the image. Generative stuff may use stuff in the image and may also use stuff that's new or novel from a generative AI model. Okay, so what we want to do now is give this guy a black eye. So there's two parts to the black eye. There's going to be the swelling and there's going to be the color. And to do the swelling, we're going to use a new tool that's called Liquefy. To prepare for using Liquefy, we want to isolate out a version of this without the eyeball in there, because when we're going to use it to distort the surrounding area, we don't want to affect the eye. Now, there is a way kind of to do this with masking. It doesn't work very well. Masking in Liquefy, it's just easier to make a second layer. So we'll come over to where it says background. We'll click our lock off where it says layer 0. I'm going to be like original. And then I'm going to duplicate my layer. You can do that by clicking on these lines. You can right click and pick duplicate, or just hold down Alt Option and drag up. And now we've got 2. And I'm going to label the new one swelling. Okay, next we're going to remove the eye out of this image. And we're going to remove it out of there because when we use Liquefy here in a minute, we could do it with masking, but it's just easier if we remove the eyeball. So I'm going to click off the original layer. And that way when I'm erasing here, I can actually see what I'm doing. So I'll hit E for erase tool, or I'll click on the erase tool in my toolbar. And then we want to set the size to 1385. So I'll make swelling active. I'll right click with the erase tool active, and I'll be like 1385. And now I can erase. And if you erase and it looks like this, good. If you are erasing and nothing's happening, it's because your original layer is still visible. So make sure you turn off that original layer so the erase tool actually does something. So let's zoom in. And I'm going to erase out his iris, sclera, and pupil. Oops, don't like that. That looks good. And that should be good for us in this assignment. So Command 0, and we've got an eyeball removed. I'll turn back on the original because that'll make my life easier here in a minute. And we want to convert this for smart filters. Now, smart filters is a way that I can use anything out of the filter menu non-destructively. Neat. If I don't use smart filters, it's destructive. Now, the reason why I didn't do this right off the bat is erase tool and these removal tools don't work on smart filter layers because they're no longer directly editable. So I'll come up to filter, and I'm going to do convert for smart filters. If you get this, just click OK. And we can see down here, we've got a little symbol telling us that this is now a smart layer, meaning that we can now use smart filters on it non-destructively. So I'm going to come up to filter, and I'm going to pick Liquefy. Now, Liquefy is a cool, powerful tool. Let's fit this on my screen, Command or Control 0. And what it does is allow me to just move stuff around. So like if I have this first tool active, it's literally pushed, so I can literally just push my image around. Similarly, I have, well, here, it's a little push on here. I have reconstruct and kind of cleanup tools that try to remove some of the weird distortions or try to undo any of my Liquefy steps, which are handy. The cleanup one is only kind of useful. The undo one's pretty neat. I have spin, and it's exactly what it sounds like. I can spin stuff. And it's like, why would I want to ever spin stuff? So it's like, I want to make this guy look sad. I'd be like, spin out a little bit this way, and then spin out a little bit that way. I probably need to make you a little bit smaller. There we go. And he looks sadder. See? Regular, sad. We also have the pucker tool, which puckers, so it brings stuff in. We have bloat, which does the opposite. It pushes stuff out. And I can always access the opposite version of any tool. So like actually can access pucker or bloat by holding down the Alt Option key, and it does the opposite of what that tool is supposed to do. Same thing with the spin. The way I was making it spin 2 different ways was holding down the Alt Option key. We have Shift Edge, and so we just shift an edge, and if you drag down, it shifts it out. And then we have masking, which allows me to mask off an area saying, please don't affect this. And that way, when I'm using a tool, I can only affect the areas around it, and then I can erase my mask. So like in theory, we could try to use the mask to do the eyeball, but it's just easier to erase that hole out rather than try to do masking. Another neat tool is the face aware version of this, which gives me a bunch of detected sliders on here that allow me to move things based on somebody's facial features. So it's like as an auto detection for their face. We also have it as sliders over here in our panel options over on the right. We're not going to use it, so I'm just going to collapse it down. So to start, we're going to grab the push tool and we're going to close his eye up a little bit. And then we're going to add swelling over the areas with bone. So like if you think about getting a shiner, one, your eyeball swells up. And then particularly where there's bone structure, you're going to have more of that kind of swelling happening. So we're going to go ahead and grab the push tool and we're going, forward warp. And we're going to set the size to 75. We're going to set the density to 50, and we're going to set the pressure to 75. And I'm going to do short little drags on this to close the eyelid up a little bit. Now, if you're getting some warnings about visuals and stuff like that, double check over here to see that it says show backdrop and that it's set to use all layers and blend mode behind. So like if I'm in front and I try to use this, I get warnings. So make sure you have it set to behind, and that way it will behave as expected. Now, if you're on a weaker power computer or you're running a lot of stuff on your computer like I am right now, your computer might, the mouse might lag a little bit, and that's just kind of the nature of Liquefy. It's a little resource intense. Once you've gotten this closed up a little bit, we are going to, I like that last one. Yeah, there we go. We're going to grab the pucker tool, and basically we're going to then set the size for the pucker to be 100, 50, 50. So 100, 50, 50. By the way, I'm moving quickly between these boxes, so I just click in the first one, type in what I want, hit tab, hit tab, hit tab. Tab is a way of quickly moving between these boxes. And I'm just going to tighten that up a little bit. I'm just clicking right now. I'm not clicking and dragging. Don't like how that kind of zoomed in. There we go. Maybe do one click over the eye as well. Yeah, there we go. Let's grab bloat. And for bloat, we're going to do 100, 50, 50 again. So 100, 50, and 50. And I'm just going to do a couple little clicks. Again, where this bone structure would be, that would kind of really swell up from getting, smacked in the face. Now this looks pretty good to me. Putts around with yours a little bit. So like we click preview on and off, we can see the effect that we're having. And maybe actually we'll add a little bit of swelling right here. And we'll click OK. Now at any point, since this is a smart layer, I can come over and double click on Liquefy and it will reopen this window. Now if I need to be able to do direct edits on this, so like if I want to erase, notice how it gives me a no and I try to erase, it has to rasterize it. And I click OK and I lose that smart layer ability. So again, smart layers, you can't use brushes or remove tools or erase or stuff like that on it. But anything up here in this filter menu becomes undoable. Something that can be a little confusing about the filter menu is Liquefy is now in 2 spots. And this is where if I wanted to apply the same thing multiple times to an image, I could click it right out of here. This is the apply again, basically. So like I could blur it and then I could continue to blur parts of the image using the same settings as before by clicking here. Or if I wanted to apply the same swelling settings to multiple times, I could do it out of there as well. To start a new Liquefy, I would click down here under the new Liquefy. To keep my workspace nice and clean, I'm going to click the little arrow right here to drop that up into itself. All right, the other part of the bruise is discoloration of swelling. So what I did when I was making this lesson is I Googled a bunch of bruises. And I picked what we're doing in terms of appearance based on those appearances. So like if you're lost a little bit on what colors to pick, go ahead and Google some examples. In our case, I'm going to give you the colors exactly, but when you're doing this kind of stuff on your own professionally, look up references. Okay, so to add in our color, we're going to make a new layer at the top of our layer stack. And I'm going to label it color. because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be bruise color. You could also label it bruise color. That's another good description. So let's do bruise color. And we're going to make the B for brush tool active. And we want this very first one. There's a bunch in here. We just want this first one. And we want a special brush. So to get to our special brush, we're going to go to Window. And we're going to go to Brushes or Brush Settings. Both of these will open up each other's tabs. So both of these get opened up. And we're going to use both. So you want them both open. Where it says search right here in Brushes, I'm going to type in Pastel Palooza. And we get Kyle's drawing box, Pastel Palooza. And this is a nice texturous brush. Looks like this, looks kind of like a sponge. And this will help sell the kind of discoloration shape that we want for that bruise here in a second. Under brush settings, we want to turn on something called scattering. And this will cause the brush to kind of hop around a little bit when we're working on it. So click on the word scattering, just don't click the little check mark box because it won't take you into the menu. We want into the menu, and where it says scatter, we are going to put in, what's the number? 175. Then I can either right click right here, or I could click on brush tip shape and I can set the size, and we're going to set the size to be 35 pixels. And when I click and drag of this, we get this kind of nice pattern. This will work really well for our bruise. Next, let's go ahead and pick our colors. So over here on the far left, I'm going to click on my top box. It's black in my case. It should be for you if you reset your colors earlier. I get my color picker, and we're going to type in a color. We come to the color picker and really kind of talk more about it in the technical tedium chapter. But for us, we're just going to hop in and we're going to enter in some RGB numbers. So for the first one, for R, I'm going to do 139, a nice deep red. Let's mix in some green. So let's add some green light, 31 in G. And then for blue, let's add in a little bit of blue light. We're going to do 67, and we get this kind of nice maroon. And okay. And when I paint with this maroon, it looks like hot garbage. So we have one more step to make this look decent, which is to come over to where it says normal, and we're going to pick overlay. We can see we get a really nice blood effect. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to switch to overlay. I'm going to zoom in a wee bit, and I'm going to add in plenty of red. So let's add in some little red right here. I'm not doing a lot of clicking and dragging. I'm just doing maybe clicks and little short burst drags to kind of get a little splatter of blood, maybe a little bit more right in here. And if you go over the eye, that's fine. People burst blood vessels in their eyes, something fierce. All right, now bruises usually have multiple colors in them. We're just going to do a 2-color bruise to keep this easy. So I'm going to come over here and just add in a little bit of yellow. So again, I'm clicking on where my maroon box was. I'm going to enter in some values here for RGB. We're going to do red 119, so not quite as much red. We're going to do green 130, so a little bit less green. And then we're going to have a little bit less blue, although the proportions are different, giving us this kind of nice greenish chartreuse color. And how you should use this is basically wherever we have a little bit of edge of the red, we are going to add in, it's like here's a nice little interior edge, just a little bit of yellow. Because I don't want to paint over the red, because I want to keep some of that red in there, but I want a little bit of this kind of yellowed feathering on these kind of red edges. And that looks decent. And like right now, the edging on it looks pretty rough and hard. So we're going to kind of smear this up a little bit using the smear tool or blending tool. And so to blend it out, we're going to grab smudge tool over here. It looks like a finger. If yours isn't currently a finger, it might look like a teardrop for the blur tool. We want the smudge tool. There's no hotkey for this, unfortunately. It's an older tool. And up at the top, we're going to do strength of 50. And then we're going to right click and we're going to set the size to 30 if it isn't already 30. And then just like what we did with the Pastel Palooza brush, we're going to come over to scattering and we're going to set scatter to 150. And what I'm going to do is anywhere where I see kind of some nasty pixel edges, I'm just going to do a click and a little drag because I don't want to do a lot of blending because I can overblend this. So I just want to do short little bursts of blending. Because again, that scatter is going to do a lot of this work for me for the blending, throwing stuff around. Because I want to keep some of that patchiness from that brush that we picked. Because that patchiness is, kind of looks like a blown up capillary. I don't like that. Let's blend that all the way out. Boop, boop. And that bruise now looks pretty good. Command 0 to fit that on our screen. And yeah, that looks pretty good. All right, let's remove the background. To remove our background, we're going to do generative AI. So I'm going to make the swelling layer active, and we're going to do a quick and dirty selection with select subject. And then I don't want to fill in the boxing image. I want to fill in the background. So I'm going to invert my selection by clicking the invert button. If I was doing this professionally, I might, clean up this little selection edge right here and some of these other things. But for this, we'll be fine. And then where it says generative fill in my contextual taskbar, I am going to type in a photograph of a boxing ring. If your contextual taskbar is missing, you can always open it back up from window. Generative AI can take a hot second, so it has to think about its life. When using generative AI, by the way, you'll expend something called generative credits. Depending on your subscription, you'll have hundreds or thousands of generative credits, so usually enough. But you can check it from your Creative Cloud website to see how many credits you have. We can see over here we have our generative credit layer. It's got a new special symbol right here for these stars telling me that it's a generative layer. Generative layers, what it does is it gives you 3 different options to fill in for. So if this layer active under properties, I can click through these varying options. And honestly, that first one's pretty good. So I think I'm just going to use this. And we'll label this background, because that's what it is now. And this looks pretty good. It's not bad. Like if I was doing a quick and dirty advertisement, I definitely want to fix this glow up a little bit better. But this would be good enough for a quick and dirty, background image with some text over it. Go ahead and save it as a PSD, and then save it also as a JPEG. Remember how to save a JPEG is you go to File, and you pick Save a Copy. And then again, you must absolutely pick JPEG from this dropdown. So save your files, and then let's go ahead and take a look at how we can open up and use Firefly. Okay, to launch Firefly, you can do it from the Creative Cloud app and just search for Firefly. Although honestly, this is the same thing as going down to Google Chrome and opening it up and typing in Adobe Firefly. It does the same thing. When you bring up Firefly, you'll just click into it. For some reason, it starts with a splash page. You can see it's just like taking you to Adobe Firefly. I don't know why it gives us a splash page. Nobody likes splash pages. They haven't been a thing in like 2 decades, Adobe. That said, we get another splash page, kind of, where it's like we can tell it what kind of mode we want to enter into. It's a little clunky, but we're coming along. For us, we're just going to do images, but video and audio and vector are now available to us, although they're pretty resource intensive in terms of number of generative credits you burn. So where it's asking us what we want to do, we can type in a photograph of a happy golden retriever on a beach. For prompts, the more direct you can be, the better. For Adobe Firefly, we don't have a lot of weirdness in prompt crafting where we have to use like special kinds of weighted language, or we really have to kind of specify like styles and stuff like that. Because we can specify those styles over here on the left because of the API for Firefly. But for like other generative generators, there's other ways that you'll want to type that in. And the images it gives us are pretty good. Like that's not bad. I don't know why. I mean, it's doing a little bokeh effect right there. It's not great, and that's not a golden retriever. This one's pretty good, and this one's pretty good. Even has like the photographer's quotation marks shadow here in the background. So for control wise, over on the left, we have what model we're using. So as new models come out, we'll have them be available here. We also have 3, which is kind of a weirder, less primitive one. That's where a lot of the images for the textbook were generated. Ultra, this is kind of a higher quality version of it, but it costs premium things. Similarly, we can bring in other models that may be better, or that may be better for certain types of uses by clicking on add. But again, that's a premium feature. Next, we can tell it content type, photo versus art. In this case, I told it was a photograph, so it automatically grabbed photo. But if I wanted a drawing and painting, I could click on art. Visual intensity, so like how intense of an image it looks. So like, and like part of what it is like it's bringing in some weight from the prompts. Composition, I can tell it to change the composition of the image by loading in an image or browsing a gallery and picking like a composition for it that I happen to like. Let's grab something abstract like this ball, And let's turn it up pretty strong and see what that looks like. Which it will be pretty abstract because that's a ball on a square. But you can use it like if I wanted like a portrait version of it. It's like a dog sitting right here. I could use that to bring in that kind of appearance of the dog, like a portrait version. Styles, so like, do I want it to be kind of like a nice interior? Do I want it like a drawing? Do I want it like vector art? And then effects, this is another way of kind of, it's similar to style, but it's another way of bringing in certain types of appearance of what I want it to look like. So let's come back up to composition and let's turn you off. I'm going to leave, well, let's do this first one for styles. And oops, looks like all of that's in styles. And let's do all. And I don't know, let's do cyberpunk, something goofy. And then themes, anime. All right, that's a new one. Let's see what anime looks like. Chiaroscuro, light from dark. I love that in painting. And then, I don't know, give me some crazy bokeh effects and screw materials. The rest of this is fine. Color and tone, golden hour, lighting, surreal, camera angle, wide angle. And let's ask it to throw out something out there and see what it gives us. It's easy, by the way, just kind of go to town on this and that's rad. Yeah, although it's less photographic than the other ones, it kind of makes sense with the more abstract style stuff that we brought in there. Like a little synthwave background. Anyway, whenever you're happy with one of your generations or you think it's usable, you can click the little download button to gain access to it on your computer for use. Like you just click it and download it onto your computer for you to be able to use. So not super hard. All right, lastly, we need to talk a little bit about different models and different systems. So like this is because it's easier this way, this is a spread from the text version of the video you guys are watching. And in it, we can see multiple generations of the same thing from Firefly and then generations of the same prompt from different other AIs out there. And so AI is updating very quickly. So like here we have Firefly 23, 24, and 25. And we can see as it's changing, the way it outputs the same prompt will also change, but usually it's been getting better. So like when I say painting, it's giving me more painterly look over here. These ones are fairly abstract and weird, although we still get this weird little harpy thing over here. But like it doesn't, what I'm asking it to do for these three and these other ones is to create a combo of the Oh Really Owl, which all of them kind of fail to identify what the Oh Really Owl is. It's a 2000s meme. And then Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, which is this painting over here. And so what we see with the Firefly one is that it knows what a girl is, it knows what an owl is, and it knows what a painting is. But it doesn't know what Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring is. And that's because Firefly is what we call culturally ignorant. So for any AI, it has data that it's been fed. And if something isn't in the data that it's been fed, it doesn't know what it is. And so Adobe hasn't fed in a lot of stuff into its model. However, by excluding certain things, it's dodged a couple of the legal problems that may or may not arise in AI. So right now, Firefly is trained on Adobe's holdings or stuff that they've bought. This means that there's none of that kind of future question of copyright, which is currently going through the courts, versus Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and ChatGPT, which downloaded huge chunks of the internet and fed it into their models. And because it fed it into its models, all three of these clearly know and are referencing Vermeer's painting, so they're not culturally ignorant. Although we can also see kind of other generational issues, like Midjourney 2022, when I gave this, it gave me a photograph. Stable Diffusion also gave me a photograph, versus ChatGPT relatively recently did a quite good job. Like it looked at the original painting, it looked at my request, and it made it look pretty close, even in terms of like oil style paintings to Vermeer's painting. So as these continue to evolve, one, they'll be better. And then two, we have these kind of long-standing questions of copyright. The other thing, of course, is that anything that you make in these AI models is copyright-free currently. All right, so that's it. It's not too bad. Moral questions are weird on this. We're going to leave that alone for now. Those are a different